Okay, so get ready to dive into some fascinating stuff about biblical prophecy because today we're going deep on the end times. But get this with a twist.
Oh, I like twists.
Right. You've sent us some seriously intriguing thoughts on believers, not just as, followers of Christ, but as sons of God.
Yeah, that's a powerful concept right there.
It really is. And what's got me hooked is their role in the whole grand scheme of things. I don't know about you, but I'm used to hearing about Bride of Christ, the marriage supper, the whole 9 yards.
Right, the traditional view.
Exactly. But this dives into something totally different. Think inheritance authority, maybe even drones.
It's exciting, isn't it? What's really compelling here is how this whole Sons of God angle really challenges those common end times interpretations.
Throws a wrench in the works.
It does. Offers a fresh take on what it means to reign with Christ.
So you're saying it's not just about being saved from something, but being empowered for something.
You got it. It's about stepping into an active role, not just sitting on the sidelines.
Wow. I like the sound of that. So where do we even begin with all of this?
Well, we've got to start with the hierarchy.
Hierarchy. Okay. You're going to have to break that down for me.
Picture it like a heavenly org chart, with different levels of authority.
Okay, so not just a free-for-all in heaven. There's structure.
Oh, yeah, tons of it. And that's where the source you sent comes in. It talks about this intricate angelic hierarchy with both good and fallen angels occupying positions of real power.
Hold on, so you're telling me there are fallen angels actually in charge of stuff?
That's what the source suggests. They've got roles, responsibilities woven into the very fabric of the cosmos.
That's kind of mind-blowing. So if there's this heavenly chain of command, where do we as believers fit in?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it? And this is where things get really, really interesting.
Okay, you've got to give me something here. I'm on the edge of my seat.
The source proposes that believers, as sons of God, are destined to replace those fallen angels within this hierarchy.
Wait, are you serious? We could actually inherit the roles and responsibilities of these fallen angels.
It's a bold claim, no doubt, but there's actually scriptural support for it.
Really? Like what?
Well, for starters, Colossians 1:15-16 describes Christ as the firstborn over all creation, highlighting his authority over everything in heaven and on earth, and that includes these angelic rulers.
So these aren't just like symbolic titles, they're actual positions of power.
That's the implication. And to really grasp the significance of this, we have to go back to the beginning. How was this angelic hierarchy initially established?
Okay, so take us back to the beginning.
Job 38:7 describes these angelic beings referred to as sons of God rejoicing at the creation of the earth. They were there at the dawn of time witnessing it all.
So angels have been involved since day one, but then of course things went south, right? Enter the fallen angels.
Unfortunately, yes. The source explains that a good chunk of these angels led by Satan decided to rebel against God.
Classic rebellion story.
Right, but here's the thing. Their rebellion didn't necessarily mean they lost their positions.
Wait, really? They went rogue, but kept their jobs.
It seems that way. They clung to their thrones. Their dominions continued to exert influence even in their fallen state.
Okay, that is wild. So we've got fallen angels, potentially still calling some of the shots up there, and we're supposed to replace them. How in the world does that even work?
Well, it's not like we just suddenly pop into their positions. It's more of a process.
A process.
Okay.
I'm listening.
The source uses a fascinating analogy. The Israelites entering the Promised Land. They didn't just waltz in and take over. It was a series of strategic conquests, taking territory little by little, establishing their presence as they went.
So God might use a similar approach in the spiritual realm.
Exactly. It's a gradual takeover, a strategic phased process.
Instead of one big battle, it's more like a divine game of chess.
You could say that. And it suggests that God might be working through multiple groups of believers, each playing a part in reclaiming those positions of authority, cleansing the heavens from the influence of those fallen angels.
Multiple groups, like different waves of believers throughout history. Or is this something that happens all at once?
This is where it gets really interesting. The source connects this idea of multiple groups to a rather cryptic passage in Revelation, the story of the male child.
Ooh, Revelation 12. That's where things get really symbolic and honestly a little confusing.
It is a complex chapter filled with vivid imagery, but let's break it down.
Please do, because I need all the help I can get with Revelation.
Revelation 12:4-5 describes this great dragon who uses its tail to sweep a third of the stars from the sky. Now, stars often symbolize angels in biblical language.
Right, those messengers of light. So this dragon casting down stars, is that talking about a third of the angels falling from heaven?
That's the traditional interpretation, but remember the source is challenging us to see things from a different angle.
Yeah.
It suggests that this event might be directly connected to the male child who is caught up to God and to his throne in verse 5. This male child destined to rule all the nations with a rod of iron clearly represents authority and dominion.
Okay, I'm starting to see where you're going with this.
Hmm.
So you're suggesting that the dragon casting down the stars, could this actually be those fallen angels losing their positions?
It's a possibility, right?
And could the male child symbolize a group of believers who then step into those now vacant roles?
That's the question the source raises.
Wow. So this group of believers ascends to heaven, takes their place in the divine hierarchy, and potentially plays a part in reclaiming authority from those fallen angels. That's fascinating.
It really connects the dots in a whole new way, and it highlights the strategic nature of God's plan. He's not just replacing evil with good, he's restoring his intended order, establishing his people, his sons, as co-rulers with Christ.
Okay, this is already blowing my mind. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, I'm curious. If this male child represents the first group of believers to take their place in heaven, what about everyone else?
Ah, you're thinking.
Right. How do the rest of us factor into this whole scenario of replacing fallen angels and reclaiming authority? I mean, not all of us are going to be part of this initial wave, right?
You are right on the money. This is just the first wave in God's master plan for reclaiming what was lost. And to understand how he intends to replace the rest of those fallen angels, we need to look at what the source calls God's secret weapon.
Okay, now you've got me completely hooked. God's secret weapon. Don't leave me hanging. What is this secret weapon, and how does it play into this incredible story of sonship, authority, and the ultimate battle for the cosmos? We'll dive into that right after this quick break. So, God's secret weapon. Lay it on me. What is it?
Well, it's not your typical weapon, that's for sure. The source points to martyrdom.
Martyrdom.
Oh.
Whoa, okay. That's not something you hear every day.
You're telling me. But the source presents it not as a defeat, but as this powerful act of faith with massive spiritual implications.
I'm trying to wrap my head around this.
Yeah.
So when a believer dies for their faith, are they instantly slotted into a fallen angel's position?
It's not quite as simple as a one-for-one replacement. The source points us to Revelation 7.9, where we see this huge multitude of believers standing before God's throne, dressed in white robes, holding palm branches.
Yeah, the ultimate victory parade. But how does this tie back into martyrdom?
Well, Revelation 12.11 tells us that these victorious believers overcame him. That's talking about Satan by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives so much as to shrink from death.
So their willingness to die for their faith is what ultimately gives them victory. But I'm still trying to picture how this overcoming actually works in the spiritual realm. We're talking about a heavenly hierarchy, right? So how does martyrdom actually translate into reclaiming authority?
Okay, so think of it this way. Every act of martyrdom is like a big old declaration of allegiance to God. It's saying, nope, we choose God over the powers of this world.
It's a direct challenge to Satan's authority.
You got it. A refusal to bow down.
So each martyr sacrifice weakens Satan's power and strengthens God's hold on the spiritual realm, like a spiritual tug of war.
Precisely. And as more and more believers throughout history have chosen faithfulness over compromise, even unto death, it's created this ever-growing force in heaven, a force to be reckoned with.
So we have this influx of faithful believers into heaven. But we're still talking about that divine org chart, right? How does this multitude of martyrs actually take on those positions of authority within the angelic hierarchy?
It's like God is strategically using martyrdom to fill those vacant positions, the roles that were meant to be filled by faithful beings. He's building an army of warriors, those who have proven their unwavering commitment to him.
Even in the face of some pretty intense pressure.
Exactly. And it's not just about numbers either. God is looking for those who have been tested and found faithful, those who embody the qualities needed to rule and reign alongside Christ.
It's not a random lottery.
Yeah.
It's about God raising up a royal priesthood.
Now you're getting it. A company of overcomers who have proven their worthiness to share in his authority and dominion.
This whole concept is amazing. It's not just about escaping a bad destination, but about stepping into a glorious inheritance, one that we actively participate in.
That's the beauty of sonship. Embracing our identity as children of God, heirs to his kingdom, and participants in his divine plan.
Okay, this is all mind-blowing. But let's talk timeline. We have this first wave, the male child entering heaven. Then over time, more believers join them through martyrdom. And eventually, all of this leads up to the Millennium, right? That 1,000-year reign of Christ everyone's talking about.
Yes, the millennial reign is a crucial part of this. And here's where the source gets really interesting. It suggests that the judgment of evil, the expulsion of Satan and his angels from heaven, that all happens before the millennial reign.
Hold on. So Satan being bound and tossed into the abyss, That's not a during the Millennium event.
According to the source, no. It argues that the cleansing of heaven is a prerequisite for the millennium. It's about setting the stage for a period of unprecedented peace and justice on earth, a taste of what God always intended for creation.
So this whole process of believers replacing fallen angels, it's about preparing the way for Christ's reign on earth, like cleaning house before the party.
Exactly. It's about removing those disruptive influences, those antagonistic forces that have been causing chaos in the spiritual realm since the fall. If heaven is still a battleground, how can there be true peace and righteousness on earth?
Makes sense. But if Satan and his crew are banished from heaven before the millennium even begins, what happens to them?
The source points to Revelation 20, where Satan gets bound for 1,000 years in the abyss. Basically a timeout where he can't mess with God's plans.
Okay, so Satan's benched, but not out of the game completely.
Yeah.
We know he eventually gets a temporary release at the end of the millennium to stir up trouble again.
Right. But for now, I think we should focus on what this millennial reign means for us as believers, especially with this sons of God perspective. If we're meant to reign with Christ, what does that actually look like?
Do we all get thrones? Are we ruling over nations? What does co-regency with Christ actually involve?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And
Yeah.
this is where the source gets really interesting because it draws a distinction between two phases in our relationship with Christ: sonship and brideship.
Two phases. Okay, you're going to have to unpack that for me.
So during the millennium, our primary identity is as sons, sharing in Christ's authority and dominion as co-rulers. But the source suggests that after the millennium, our focus shifts to brideship, our relationship centered on intimacy and union.
So two distinct expressions of our relationship with Christ. First as co-regents, then as his bride. That's fascinating. But does the source elaborate on what we'll be doing during the millennial reign? I mean, reigning with Christ sounds amazing, but it's still a bit abstract.
Unfortunately, the source doesn't go into specifics about our tasks or responsibilities during that time. It's more focused on establishing the significance of our role as sons and how that ties into God's overall plan for redemption.
Okay, so we have a framework, but the details are still a bit fuzzy. I guess it just adds to the mystery. But you mentioned this shift from sonship to brideship after the millennium. What does that transition look like? And what does it tell us about the ultimate destiny of believers within God's grand scheme? So we've covered some serious ground here, from angelic hierarchies to martyrdom as this secret weapon. And now we're stepping into this uncharted territory beyond the millennium. Like we're creating a whole new map of the end times.
And like any good map, it's raising more questions than answers.
Isn't that always the way?
Yeah.
But that's what makes this perspective so fascinating. It really makes you think, why isn't the sons of God angle more widespread? I mean, it's one thing to talk about spending eternity with Christ, but to actually reign alongside him, both in heaven and on earth, that's a whole other level.
You've hit on something really important there. The source actually addresses this very question, and it suggests that this lack of awareness isn't just by chance.
Oh, you're saying there's a reason why this perspective is so obscured.
The source proposes that Satan himself has been working hard to keep this under wraps.
Hold on, are you saying Satan has been actively trying to hide this information? This understanding of believers as sons of God, destined for authority and dominion? Why would he do that?
Think about it for a second. A church that fully embraces its identity as sons, heirs to God's kingdom, and co-rulers with Christ, that's a force to be reckoned with.
I see what you mean. So he's threatened by the idea of us stepping into our full potential.
Exactly. He knows that if believers truly grasped their potential, their God-given authority, his grip on this world would weaken big time.
It's like he's saying, sure, believe in heaven and all that, but don't even think about questioning the status quo here, let alone claiming your rightful place.
He wants to keep us playing small, focused on escaping this world, not transforming it, preoccupied with our own salvation, not stepping into our collective role as agents of God's kingdom, as instruments of his justice and righteousness.
So by downplaying this whole sonship thing, by keeping us fixated on the bride of Christ imagery, he essentially disarms us. We don't even realize the potential we have.
It's like he's hiding our future job descriptions right under our noses.
And that's why this deep dive has been so eye-opening. It's about reclaiming a lost understanding of our identity and our destiny. It's not just about exploring interesting theological concepts for fun.
It's about waking up to the reality that we're not just along for the ride. We're active participants in God's cosmic drama, in his grand plan to make all things new.
We're not just passive recipients of his grace. We're co-laborers with him.
That's it. And while this perspective might leave us with more questions than answers, it also ignites a sense of purpose and possibility. If we truly are sons and daughters of the Most High King, destined to reign alongside Christ, How does that change the way we live right now in the here and now?
That's the question, isn't it? It's one thing to grasp these concepts intellectually, but how do we actually live them out in a world that often feels so far removed from the realities of heaven and the coming kingdom?
Maybe that's part of the journey of faith, to continually seek a deeper understanding of who we are in Christ, what he's called us to do, and how we can participate in his work of redemption even in the midst of a messy world.
It's like we've been given a sneak peek at our future job description, but we're still figuring out how to shadow the king in our everyday lives.
And maybe that's where this shift from sonship to brideship comes in. As we grow in our understanding of who we are as sons, as co-rulers with Christ, we become better equipped to enter into that deeper intimacy, that profound union with him, represented by the bride of Christ.
So it's not one or the other, it's both. First, the authority and responsibility of sonship, laying the groundwork for a transformed world. Then the intimacy and oneness of brideship, experiencing the fullness of our union with Christ in the new creation.
It's a beautiful picture of how we're transformed more and more into his image.
Absolutely. And I think it speaks to the very core of what it means to be a follower of Christ. It's not about passively waiting for heaven, but actively partnering with God to bring heaven to earth, to be his hands and feet in the here and now.
And to do so with boldness and confidence, knowing that we are sons and daughters of the King, clothed in his authority, empowered by his Spirit, and destined to share in his eternal reign.
What a powerful image to end on. And on that note, we'll wrap up this incredible deep dive into the mysteries of biblical eschatology. But remember, this isn't just about head knowledge, it's about heart transformation.
Take these insights, these scriptural clues, these thought-provoking questions, and let them fuel your own exploration of God's Word.
Keep seeking, keep questioning, keep digging deeper, and discover the incredible destiny God has prepared for those who love him. Until next time, will you walk in the fullness of your identity as sons and daughters of the Most High King?